Welcome to the Macdownunder Podcast for all Australian Apple computer enthusiasts and collectors.
Welcome to episode 12 of the Macdownunder Podcast. I'm Justin, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. Last week's episode seemed very popular. In fact, it's our second most popular podcast so far, apart from the first one, which was quite a few weeks ago, or 12 weeks ago. And we were a little bit worried with it being over an hour of discussion about cables, but certainly you seem to be enjoying it, which is fantastic. And thanks so much for the likes and comments. Griff's Place, another shout out, gave us another quiz, and it was about the last Apple product to have a serial port rather than USB. And the only reason I knew the answer is I had just been looking up fiber cable on the Xserve and happened to notice that the Xserve still had a 9-pin terminal serial port attached. So thanks to Griff for the quiz. I know it's not just for me, but I can't help myself. You don't need to keep it up, but I'm loving it, and I'm sure everybody else is too. I'll try to hold off answering this time. And we've also received some great ideas for future episodes that are on our list. And so please give us any other ideas that you'd like to see in future podcasts. So now to formally introduce my co-host, Matthew. How are you today, Matthew? And what have you been up to?
Hey, JD. Hey, everyone. I am doing really well, thank you. The last week or so for me has been just a bit of spring cleaning around the museum, getting things ready for the next open at the start of September on the 6th. And just also trying to clean up a few, I'll say they're not completely retro, but a few Macs that I'm going to look at getting for sale. So cheap entry points for people that want to dabble with some Mac stuff, some MacBooks, which I'll hopefully be able to have for sort of $25 odd for sale.
Wow.
So just getting
Fantastic.
some of those ready. Yeah. So that's just bits and pieces this week, JD. So what about you? What's been keeping you busy?
I reckon we'll see those MacBooks in one of our episodes as a for sale item. That is so cheap.
Yes.
Although it's a MacBook, I've been avoiding Intel, but anyway. My last week, it's been interesting. I enjoyed the work we did on the cables episode so much that I've actually kept going. Now, I know we made a few mistakes. I made a few errors about years, and I think we misspoke about a couple of computers that might have introduced some of the cables. But the Macdownunder website, I've kept going. And so there's at least 83 interface types that I've listed, most with photos, and I've been out buying the cables that I'm missing so I can take photos of those. So that's kept me really busy for the week, just as well I'm not working at the moment. And I finally completed my iPod collection. I think I mentioned last episode I had one to go. So I'd seen one and I'd put it off because it was about an hour away, and I shouldn't have put it off because when I finally messaged the seller, he was actually in the CBD, and so only 20 minutes, so easy to get. I've spent the last couple of days taking photos of all the iPods that I've got. So I've got one of every model. I didn't go down colours, so you'll actually see on the website where the photos are. I think I've got the criteria listed there as well of how I've chosen which ones. But if you want to have a look, they're all there, including a big family photo of the entire collection. Not great resolution because I had to take it from a fair distance, but that's there. So that's there. So now I'm moving on to keyboards. So I think we had a comment about keyboards after the mouse episode. So I've started. I've got a draft web page listing everything I can find, and there's a few there I didn't know about. And so I've been out searching for the ones that I'm missing to fill out that part of my collection, and then we'll have the research for a future episode. So it's been a fun week. Really, that last episode with Nick was fantastic and really got the juices flowing. So I've been very much into my Apple collecting this last week.
That's great, JD. Congratulations on completing the iPod collection. That is sensational achievement, and I will be jumping on to have a look at those photos after the episode. That's great. And yes, the keyboards, I'm looking forward to that as well when we get to that episode. That'll be great.
Yeah, thanks. The iPod one really has been a labour of love because I've been buying them when they're still relatively contemporary, so that's not been a cheap part of my collecting. But I've enjoyed it, and I've used most of them at some point. And I'll just call out, spoilers for the episode coming up. But there's the iPod 4 and there's the iPod 4 Photo. And I thought I had both, but as people might know that have been listening along, I think I've bought something in the past, like 30 years ago, and I go to find it and it's actually not there, or I bought two of the same one and not the variant. So I actually had to power them both up. And I thought I could tell from the screen because they're slightly different colours. But I had to actually power them up. And the poor things, of course, they're hard drive driven. And so the battery wasn't powerful enough for the hard drive to stay running. So they boot and turn off, and boot and turn off, and boot and turn off until they got enough power to actually power on. And then as soon as you did something, and then power off again. So yeah, just be careful with your iPods if you're booting them up. You do need to keep a little bit of charge in them so you don't kill the hard drives. So hopefully I haven't done that. But anyway, it was an interesting little sojourn in the iPod area.
Yeah, very cool.
Now, in last week's episode, I made a slip of the tongue comparing, as it happens, the Mac Classic to the iPod Classic. And Matt picked me up and suggested that would be a great idea for an episode. In fact, such a good idea that that's what we're going to do today, is to talk about, in particular, where Apple have recycled names or naming conventions throughout their products. And I've had a ball in the last couple of days doing the background research on this, and I know Matt and I were talking off camera just before. I think he's enjoyed it as well. So are you in for a treat? Well, we're in for a treat because I'm going to love this conversation. And hopefully you will all enjoy it too. So
I think JD, this one, if we just put a disclaimer in there that this could, there are so many little nuances and variations that this could very quickly become a very long conversation. So we'll try to keep it concise, but I think our viewers will also see that there are so many different linkages as well between a lot of things here. So this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to this, JD.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to miss things and we'll get some things wrong. So feel free to comment, and we'll talk about that at the end of the discussion as well. But anyway, let's kick off. So of course, the first Apple computer product was the Apple Computer one, in fact, and it's entirely reasonable for a young, aspiring startup company such as Apple in 1976 to label their first ever product a one, because the idea is this is the first and we're going to make lots more. So they got into numbers, but not quite sure how well they went with numbers. Anyway, Matt, do you want to talk to us about the number one?
Number one, yeah. So we've got the very first with the more officially, I think we can say the number one, and then we've got this situation where a lot of other products have sort of retrospectively been called the such and such one. If we use the Lisa, for example, it was originally launched as the Lisa, and retrospectively we've referred to the very first version of the Lisa as the Lisa one. The only other reference that I could sort of come across was I think we're going to have a lot of notable mentions in these categories, JD, as we go along. But notable mention, I think, was the Apple One scanner. It features the word one, and that was that was the only sort of other reference I could find where the number one was used in its just by itself. So we certainly saw lots of references to 100s as we sort of move on, which we'll talk about. But yeah, that's where we started off.
You're on a roll. Do you want to do the 100s as well? Since it's got a one in it.
Yes. Yeah. So look, I think we've seen, the Apple Color Monitor 100 was one of the very early Apple monitors that came out in the 80s, which was kind of, I guess a bit of an anomaly when you consider that other monitors at the time included a reference to the computer that they'd be associated with. So the 3, of course, which we know is one of the early monitors. We'll come back to that. But thereafter, we saw the use of 100 associated with sort of a I suppose, a specification step, as we saw with the PowerBook 100, the QuickTake 100, Message Pad 100. Later on, we saw those numbers sort of increment. I think the PowerBook 100 in particular, notably, is that we had the 100, the 140, and the 170, I think, all at the same time. So it really distinguished it as the entry level position there. Whereas things like the QuickTake and the Message Pad 100 incremented in numbers as the models went on. So
consistently inconsistent.
Yeah. Yeah. So there we go on the 100. All right. I'll hand over to you, JD, for what can you tell us about 2?
2 is my favourite because my first computer was the Apple II. And I guess the interesting thing is we've got on the slide there is that, and we sort of talked about it with the 1, in fact, is that Apple used a couple of different ways to describe 2. So with the Apple II, they used the reversed square brackets, which were, well, still synonymous with Apple II in my circles anyway. And then we have the slanting 2 strokes. And of course, it makes it really hard when you do a Google search or an eBay search or any sort of search to find an Apple II using those characters. In fact, sometimes they're illegal search terms, so they don't work. And then there's the Roman numeral 2, the 2 I's, and of course the number 2. So there's a heap of products that were 2s, so they really liked 2. I have listed the Lisa 2, but as you mentioned, it was actually marketed as the Lisa, and everyone came to call it the Lisa 2. And some of the marketing material talked about the specifications. So you could buy a Lisa 2.5, which is a reference to 2 megabytes of RAM and 5 megabytes of storage space. And there was the 210, same thing. So I've listed it there, but again, it's one of those things. And then things like the iPad 2, I think they did market it as the iPad 2, like there's a new one, but they didn't really go too far down the chain after that. Same with the Mini. And then the watch, they didn't even call it. It's just the Apple Watch. And then it's which series of Apple Watch are you buying. So they've come at the 2 a couple of different ways. I guess some particular mentions for me, the Mac 2. We'll talk about the Mac 2, I think, a fair bit through, well, at least the first half of the conversation. The Classic 2, my lament, because that's the one that I got a huge battery bomb on, so it's still in my mind. I have actually just bought a new motherboard for it. I'm still waiting for it to arrive. And the Color Classic 2 is a special one as well, because it was only released in Japan. So there's a few special ones in the 2s. But they definitely liked 2. And I guess, just in terms of your previous comments about product lines, this photo's got the original Apple II logo there from the Apple II computer, and you can see in the back there the Disk 2 referencing the disk drive. So we're not going to go down the deep dive around accessories because a lot of them were named after the products that they were attached to.
As well, if we look at the Macintosh 2, for example, which we're going to discuss, it was then, noting that there's variants of the Macintosh 2, so it was like a family. Whereas if we look at the LC, for example, well, the LC was the family, and the 2 was the second version of it. We had the 3 and the so just different, as you said, consistently inconsistent. So that's that's. I
think that'll be a theme. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about the 3?
So then, we move on to 3. Of course, we had the Apple III, which I guess just to that point before was we'll call it a brand new machine. You can flame me in the comments, but essentially a brand new machine. A very different machine to the Apple II. I think it would be reasonable to say. And we had the slanted lines there on that one. And the slashes, I guess we'd call them if we're using the keyboard. Never a Mac 3 though, so never a Macintosh 3 that we had. And then we've got the Series 3, as you mentioned earlier, JD, on the Apple Watch, which was just sort of that newer version, that updated version of the watch. So not heaps of stuff on the Apple on the use of 3, which leads us into
4. So Apple doesn't seem to like 4 at all. So there was never an Apple 4. So we've had an Apple Computer 1, we've had an Apple II, Apple III. There was never any Apple IV. But if you look at the history, you would think that the Lisa was probably the actual Apple IV in terms of lineage. Respects to artificial intelligence for helping me with that logo there. And there was never a Mac 4 either, although there was a Quadra. And we'll come back to that theme, and the Quadra referring to the 68040 chip, so the 4 in particular, that came in the Quadras. But it was also in the Centris, so that, again, consistently inconsistent. And there was no Mac LC4. We actually missed LC3 off the previous slide. So there's no Mac LC4, but they did have a Mac LC 475. And I'm not entirely sure what the 475 referenced, other than it was the next one in the series.
Just off the cuff, JD, I'm going to say the 475 was when we started to see the other LC models come out, such as the 5XX series. So whether or not it was going back to that same sort of concept of the PowerBook 100 kind of, or PowerBook 1XX series. So yeah, sort of where does it slot in the hierarchy? Just a thought. Yeah,
you're probably right. So Apple, I mean, they've used lots of other numbers, but they sort of, in terms of sequence, they sort of don't go much past 4. Obviously, series, and the iPhones are up to 17, just about. So maybe we move on to letters. Do you want to have a chat to us about letters?
Yeah, well, I think the SC one at the top of the list there is always, I'll admit that one didn't hit me straight away as something being obvious early on in my collection, my journey collecting Apple products. But as soon as I'd sort of clicked, I was like, of course, it's for SCSI equipped sort of devices. So, and that's at a time where SCSI was a big, big news, I guess, for offering the interface on those products. So, using the SC to indicate that the hard drive interface. So we've got the SC that was on the 20 SC, 40 SC, and 80 SC, and 160 SC, I think, as well. And there was
I need to find one of those.
One of the but the SC also featured on some of the printers as well. So the laser writer, but SC was usually our SCSI. SCSI designation, and then speaking of printers, PS being PostScript equipped printers there too. So several of the laser writers included PS. Not all of them though. So we know PostScript was a big big step forward in Apple's implementation of PostScript on the laser writer. But it was only sort of in the mid-90s that they started putting PS on some of the laser writers to include it as a designation of including PostScript when some other models didn't. So I might go on with AV as well there, JD, while I'm on a roll here, that the AV we know is for audio visual, and then we saw a number of models, particularly in the mid 90s, when getting or having a computer that was equipped to have audio visual capabilities to bring in audio or different ways of getting audio out. We had the AV equipped Macs, like you've mentioned there as well, which was the designation. And I know, there's a couple there. Quadra 840 AV, I think, notable mention on that one, being probably one of the more desirable machines in the classic Mac range there.
I think the fastest Quadra they made, from memory.
So I'll hand the baton over to you, JD.
Okay, sure. So LC we've talked about already, which was the low-cost series. They were still pretty expensive, mind you, but cheaper than a Mac 2 in the day. And as we've talked about, there was the LC 2, 3, 475, 520, 550, 575, 580, etc. It goes on and on and on. And I'm not sure that they got released in Australia, but the Power PCs had LC versions as well. And as Matt's mentioned off camera, the LC is at the end of the series name in the Power Macs, so the 5000 series Power Macs in particular. CDs in a whole range of things that are got compact discs, no surprise there. So the original Apple CD SC, well, there you go. There's an intermix already of a couple of different things. So a CD and a SCSI. The Power CD, which is a great product, that'll show up further down because there's another buzzword in there. DV was for digital video, and it was largely attached to the devices that came with FireWire in the early days, but it was really the DV, the digital video connection, that was the sales feature. But FireWire did so many things. And then, of course, HD everywhere. It's sort of almost an industry standard that means high definition. And you can see that there's quite a few software products coming up, and we'll talk about software products more and more as we go through. And the cinema display HD as well. So quite a few things. All right, we'll move on. So Apple really liked individual letters a lot too. So what do you want to tell us about C?
C, gosh, well, compact, color. I think they're the most common uses of the C when referring to the Apple range. So we had the 2C, of course, which was a very compact version of the Apple II, and it's related accessories as well. And then when we're talking about the Macintosh, and again, we're now sort of talking about the Macintosh 2 family, the Macintosh 2 CX and CI, were where we had compact versions of, what the Macintosh 2 started out to be quite a large machine physically. This was a compact version. So
I guess it was the mini of its day, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So that's a really good way of putting it, and we'll talk about mini later as well. But that's a good way, because I think sort of thereafter the C started to be attributed to the fact that machines were color capable. So the PowerBooks being I should say in the PowerBook range, color capable versions, when color was certainly a premium specification on the laptop range that we had. So we saw that in the Duos as well. And then, the C popped up again when we had the iPhone 5. We had the iPhone 5C, which came about, and that was the iPhone which featured multiple color versions of the casing for the iPhone 5C, which was cool too. So compact and color is what I think we can say we most know use of C for.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them there. Apple also liked S, and it can mean a whole range of things, as we can see. Initially sound, in some cases speed, Siri for some of the phones, security, or successor in some cases. So the Apple IIGS, one of my favorite machines. I actually used one for a very long period back when it was contemporary. So S in there is for sound, and it had the Sonic sound chip in it. So absolutely built for sound. Sadly, didn't have stereo out of the box. Who knows what that was about. The 2SI was the sound version of the Mac 2. Not quite sure what the I was about there, but anyway. We got the iPhone 3GS, where S was the successor to the 3G, and the same with the 456, and the XS again was the successor to the iPhone X. And in the PowerBooks, we've got S as well. Now, interestingly, I haven't actually done a deep dive on this, but I certainly know in the case of the 5300, the CS was the cheaper, less resolution color machine. So I'm not sure what S stands for there. You could say maybe sucks. I'm not sure. And I think that was also the case with the 190 CS and the 1400 CS as well. But certainly in the 5300, there was the C. The CE was the premium high resolution one, and the CS was the cheap one, from what I remember.
Fascinating.
Let's move on to E.
Hey, gosh, yeah. So again, a couple of uses that we've got here. Education and enhanced. So you could almost say that they're, serving different purposes there. Education, we often know as sort of, cut down in some degree, but yeah, enhanced as well. So the 2E and the 512KE were leveraging the E as enhanced. PowerBook 5300 CE. I'm going to throw to you, JD. Is that enhanced or education?
I reckon it's enhanced because, as I just mentioned, that was
Enhanced.
the ultra. That was the premium 5300. That was the expensive one.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, against the CS
expensive.
that you
E for
mentioned. There we
expensive.
go. Yes. And then, we've got a couple of products that featured specifically for education markets. So the eMate and the eMac. And I guess talking about, the eMate was a we'd say purpose built. They certainly serve purposes outside of the education market, but I think, the intention was to get it into the education market, as with the eMac. But the eMac also featured some, if we look at the eMac, it's a CRT based Mac when we're starting to transition to LCD panels on the well and truly, in the iMac range, transitioning to LCD panels. So different choices in components to be able to keep the cost down. So I don't know if I'd say the same about the eMate, but maybe someone can correct me there. It's a very solidly built product. Wouldn't say it's cheap, but eWorld, our online platform that Apple had put together. So I never experienced eWorld. JD, did you get to experience it firsthand?
I certainly lived through the experience, but I'd never logged in. And then, of course, it all came crashing down, and there was lots of lamenting in the Apple community for a long time for the loss of eWorld, because it had all sorts of things in it that the internet didn't actually provide when it closed down, in terms of
Yeah.
communities and social. To a degree, it was a social network as well. But no, I whilst I was
Interesting.
around and I read about it, I wasn't actually involved in it.
I was a CompuServe boy, so yeah, I guess might have been an alternative there. So if we cover off the last on the list of the iPhone 16e, which goes back to the sort of the cut down version of the product. So yeah, E has a few different uses there, and as we'll see in a moment, we see it coupled with the letter S as well. So we put a couple
With
together
the
here, but for a
with
different
the
purpose.
S. Yeah, so the SE, it was worth calling this one out because there's so many different products with SE. Unlike DV, it was all about digital video, etc. But the SE, there were lots of different things. So system expansion. Now I had to actually do a bit of history to find out what the SE was about with the Mac SE, but it was system expansion because it had was it a PDS or a new bus? I think it was a PDS slot that allowed you to put extra expansion in there. So that's the Mac SE. Now, there are lots of configurations of the Mac SE, and I've done a little bit of a flex with the photo there. The SE SuperDrive is a slightly rarer version of the SE. And I think we're going to come back to SuperDrive later on too. The SE30 you've talked about. So that was the SE that had an 030 in it. Well, actually, I think you've got an anecdote about the SE30. Did you want to talk about that now?
Yeah, this one, connects to another letter that we'll use coming up when we talk about X to represent the use of the 030 in Apple's product range as they started integrating that. But of course, we couldn't have a product called the Macintosh SEX, so that probably wasn't going to fly. So using a slash 30 rather than an X in there on the SE30. You can see for obvious reasons. So,
Yeah, and I didn't know that story, so thanks for sharing. That's great to
yeah.
know. I'll put that back in the memory banks. The iMac DV SE. So here's another one. We're starting to get a couple of different. In fact, we're going to talk about iNext too. So there's quite a few bingos in here. So the iMac with the digital video FireWire in an SE in a special edition, I suspect that was. I don't think it would have been system expansion then. The iPhone SE, again, special edition, but to mean something slightly different here, it was special edition because it was cheaper. But anyway, there you go. And the Watch SE, I guess, much the same. And the iBook special edition, it was actually spelt out. They didn't use the SE moniker, but Matt's picked up that I reckon it probably is an SE, so fair enough.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Do you want to tell us about I?
Oh gosh, yeah, you've given me the big one there, JD, and we know Apple has loved use of I since Jobs returned and introduced the. Well, actually, can we say that he first introduced himself as the iCEO, the interim CEO, or did the iMac come first?
Actually, I didn't put that in. We must put that in the list. Thank you. Good pickup.
Yeah. So obviously not an Apple product. I don't think we'd call Mr. Jobs an Apple product, but the iCEO reference there, which he always said was for interim. But of course, we then had the iMac come out, and then use of I, moved through initially, we'd say just to represent the consumer level of the products. Whereas, at the time we still had Power Mac and Power Book to represent the professional level. But the I, we're sort of just stuck. I think we'd all say thereafter, we don't have we never had a power pod when the iPod was out for the consumers. It's always just been the iPod, of course. But we've seen obviously so many things that took the I at the starting point there. And look, as I think it's important to say the iMac initially was for the internet, the connectivity aspect, which was so simple to get your Mac on the internet. There's the famous ad of showing how quickly it can be done. So, but as it's got on the slide there, intuitive, individual, instruct, inform, inspire, a few different uses there as well.
Now, apparently those words, because I did the research on this, they were the various words that Steve Jobs used in his keynote speeches to explain the I in things. I'm sure there's others that weren't listed, but that was some of them. And I guess the other interesting thing with the eyes is it's starting to be lots of software as well. So it is a lot of hardware, but there's a lot of software in there that you sort of forget because some of them have moved on and they've dropped the eye since. But all the iLife products, all the iWork products, and then the other bits in between, there were so many things with I in them at one point, and now we're slowly moving across to just the product name or Apple product name. But eyes have been around. X was an interesting. Actually, I'm glad I'm doing X because we were having a chat off air, and there's a big conversation to have in here. There's a big conversation with all of these actually, but Apple has been around since 1976. They've had a lot of products. So X came to being with the Mac XL in terms of Apple products that I'm aware of, which was the extra large Mac, which I'm really sad about because I love the Lisa. And to say it's just a Big Mac is, pardon the pun, but to say it's just a Big Mac is just really sad for all of its capabilities to be relegated to Mac OS with only one application at a time when it used to be a multitasking environment. Really, really sad. Anyway, then there's the Mac 2X. Now, we know the original Mac had the 68000 processor, and the Mac 2 had the 68020 processor, so Mac 2 020 made sense. The Mac 2X had another technology bump and had the 68030. So I guess the X might actually really be a 1 or an I, because it really, the Mac 2X really should have been the Mac 3, I reckon, when you look back on how things progressed. But it did introduce the 030 processor. So then there was the Compact X. We've talked about that already. Then there was the Fast X, which was the Mac 2 FX. Still an 030 processor, but much faster, and had all sorts of issues with the bus speed because of that, as some people will know. And then there's the Mac 2 VX, And the V refers to vector graphics, which will come up again later on. So lots of Mac 2s with X's in them, which people might remember. People may not remember AUX, which was the Apple Unix operating system in the System 7 days. So it was actually a Mac Unix system with Mac OS 6 and then later OS 7 running on top of it in a window, which makes for pretty amazing times. So we thought it was pretty amazing that you can run, we'll talk about classic OS, but you can run Mac OS 9 under Mac OS X. Well, actually, Apple have been doing that for a long time. So AUX, great operating system if you want to check it out in your 030 machine. Then, of course, we've got OS X or OS 10, which was the X was really about 10. And I'm not quite sure where the X comes for Xserve. I don't know whether they had an Elon Musk moment or something, but they've introduced X into a few things. So the Xserve, and then there was the Xserve RAID as well. So there was that sort of, and Xcode, XDARWIN, XQuartz was all about OS 10. And Xsan, again, was a reference back to both OS 10 and the Xserve because it was a networking system for running multiple Xserves as one single multi-processor system. And of course, then the iPhone has a lot of 10s as well, the XXR, XS, and I think there's a few others I probably haven't listed before they moved on to the 11. So X has been pretty popular in the Mac world.
Yeah, I think just looking at the way that we've changed the use of the X as well. So it was X is X back in the Macintosh 2, but with Mac OS 10 using the X, we had to sort of shift to calling it 10. And I can remember I was a bit of a stickler for always correcting people when they'd say it's Mac OS X, so. But yeah, very interesting that because then when we had to the iPhone as well, the iPhone X was the iPhone 10. So although not necessarily the 10th version, but it was the major model shift, which was iPhone 10. So yeah, so we've got varying uses of the way it's been used there by Apple as well.
Do you want to take us through G?
Ooh, yeah. Well, actually, no. You go ahead, JD, because I know you said the GS is a special place for you. So,
well, yeah. So the GS, the Apple II GS, and again another little flex. So that's the label from a Stealth 2GS upgrade of an Apple IIe. Largely because it's the only photo I had available with the GS logo on it. The G here was about graphics because the Apple II GS had high-resolution graphics, much higher than the previous Apple II, so that's where that came from. The LaserWriter 2G, I'm not entirely sure what the reference to G is there. I didn't actually research it, but there's no obvious reason for it. And of course, with the iPhone, it was about, well, the iPhone history is a bit weird because there was no iPhone 1, of course. We would have talked about it if there was. The first iPhone, which was just iPhone, was on the 2G network. And in the US. And so in the rest of the world, when it first came out, it came out on the 3G network. So the 3G is actually a reference to the network it was operating on. And then, of course, as we've already mentioned, the 3GS was the successor to the 3G. So weird use of the letters in that particular case. I'm sure there's other Gs. I just couldn't find any when I was doing any research. So if you know of any, let us know down in the comments.
I'm going to take it on board to work out what the LaserWriter G detail was there. So I like my LaserWriters, and there are various combinations of what they came with in terms of their print language and their connections. So I'll comment below when I've got the answer.
That'd be great. Do you want to tell us about V?
V, yeah. Well, I'll admit, JD, I wasn't aware that it was for vector graphics. So I've learnt from you there. I've familiar with the Macintosh 2 VI and VX. So our a couple of our other letters being used there. But I was fascinated to learn that it was vector graphics when researching that.
And having used one of these, I can't remember which one I owned as a working machine. I've got both in the collection. They weren't much to write home about. So to be honest, I had to look up what it stood for because I didn't think it had anything to do with improved graphics performance. Apparently, their graphics was improved, but no one was singing their praises back in the day that I remember.
What's interesting though is that the both of them, the VI and the VX, both have the 030 in them, as far as I'm aware. So, we talked about the X referencing the use of the 030, but in this instance, the I had it as well. So the VI had it. So, yes, there we go.
Yeah, interesting. And then, of course, there's the Apple TV. And again, I've called this out separately because there's a whole heap of products to talk through. So we could have led with it, but I think there is a story to tell. So as far as we know, the first product with TV in the name was the Mac TV, or the Macintosh TV, and there's one down in the museum if you want to check one out. And then there was the iTV. Now, that eventually became the Apple TV, but it was launched as the iTV originally. And, of course, the Apple TVs, which are still on sale now. And then there's the tvOS to support it. And, of course, we start getting into online services. We talked about eWorld before, and there's other online services, of course. But Apple TV Plus is a service that's offered online. So using TV in a whole lot of different ways, which makes sense. TV's TV, television, everyone knows that acronym these days. But so many products that they've had associated with the TV.
Before we move on, the set-top box was always just set-top box. Is that right, JD?
Yeah, the Apple interactive. In fact, it's another I, but it never had an I in it. It was interactive set-top box because I've done a little bit of research on that recently.
Yep,
for the cables. Never had TV in it, even though it was actually a product designed for TV, and it had a SCART connector. That's why I've had mine out recently. It actually had the SCART TV connector on it for that very purpose. But never featured TV.
So that was just a bit of a digress on the TV topic, but I guess we've got a bit of a segue here with Apple TV Plus into our next one.
We do. Do you want to take us through words? And the first big word is plus.
Is plus, yeah. So what I could make of this is that in the early days, plus was, I guess, a little bit similar to what we've seen the enhanced use as well. But we had, the first use of the word plus was the Apple II Plus, and then the Euro Plus and the J Plus for the localized versions of the 2 Plus. I guess then Apple had to find something else, hence why we got the 2E. But the word plus featured in revised versions of other Apple products. So that we saw the 2C Plus, which moved to a 3.5-inch floppy drive, and the Apple 3 Plus. JD, what changes did we see from the 3 to the 3 Plus?
Oh, you've got me on the spot. Certainly, yeah. It certainly resolved all of the early issues from the first batch, which most of them had been fixed actually within the Apple III series. There are multiple launches of different motherboards with different voltage configurations, and that fixed most of the early problems. So certainly there were other enhancements. I think it had the clock was built in rather than an option. It had different interface ports on the back, just the configuration. Instead of IDC, they used a D25 for the floppy. There's a whole story in that I think we covered off last week. So there were enhancements, but I couldn't speak to them with any authority today, unfortunately.
No, but I think just on that, you've given us enough to know that it was an enhancement, not a completely different product, just an enhancement. And now I'm using the word enhancement or the E there a bit too loosely. But when we look at the Macintosh Plus, that was a bit of a change from what it was replacing with the 512KE, and but back to the, with the Laser Rider Plus and the LC3 Plus and the Duo Dock Plus, they were minor, again, minor enhancements on what was already sort of out there. There were a few monitors, a couple of monitors that we saw that included the Plus designation in their name as well. And then when we look at the iMac DV Plus, it was offering just a little bit more than what the iMac DV was. So
not to be confused with the iMac DV SE that we've covered already.
Yeah. So golly. But then, then looking at the platforms, the services that we had there. I'm going to come back to iPhones in just a sec, but the services, with Apple TV Plus and Apple Fitness Plus, member only subscription based content that's there. We saw it with on another, I guess, a software feature was the HFS Plus, the file system that we saw moved up, and then. Yeah, sort of, on a separate sort of topic is the use of Plus with the iPhone range, where it's actually a bigger version. So not just an internal sort of enhancement, physically bigger. So plus size. So yeah, a bit of a few different uses for the word Plus there, JD, I'd say.
And again, for people that are following iPhones probably know this as gospel, but I had to remind myself that they stopped using Plus for a little while for the iPhones. Which is just interesting. They used it, dropped it, and then brought it back in again more recently.
Yep.
Fascinating.
It is.
All right, we'll move on to Pro. So I'm guessing it means professional. I didn't actually have to do any research for that one. I think it's fairly obvious. But it goes right back to the 1980s when the Profile, the first Apple-based hard drive, was released. And that's the picture that I've chose to use today. But basically every product that came with a professional version of it had one. And I think we've covered off before about the Apple Pro mouse, and ended up being called the Apple mouse in the end anyway. It was so early introduction of some things that then became common. But certainly the upmarket versions. I guess the Pro Display XDR is I call that. It's super expensive and absolutely a professional product. The MacBook Pro and the Mac Pro, again, we know the top tier professional series, and then all the software from the middle to the right there. Final Cut Pro was the premium movie making software. Soundtrack Pro, similar, etc. So even QuickTime Pro was kind of interesting. So there was a Pro version of QuickTime 7, I think it was. FileMaker Pro, you're more of an expert on FileMaker than myself, Matt. But
yep. The Pro, I can tell you, tidbit is the Pro piece was adopted on FileMaker when Claris started to distribute it, and that's there's a FileMaker tidbit for you.
And Mac System 7.11 was the Pro version, amazingly. I'm not quite sure. It probably meant you had to pay money for it rather than just getting it as a free upgrade, I suspect was the difference. But there you go. And Mac and Talk Pro. I love Mac and Talk. We'll come back to Talk in a minute. But Mac and Talk was the original speech synthesis software for the Macintosh. And there was a Pro version of that as well that you had to pay for. Now, we'd be used to it now as the Siri voice, but its genesis was back with Mac and Talk back in, I think, again, System 7. The original Macintosh, of course, spoke as well. And, there's the tidbit, because, of course, a Mac 128K isn't capable of speech. It doesn't have enough RAM. He actually used a 512 for the demo, but didn't release it for another 6 months or thereabouts. There you go. So much to talk about in Apple land, isn't there?
There is. Wow. There's a lot of Pro products there.
All right. Now, I don't own any Macs products, so I've had to actually steal a photo from somewhere else. But do you want to run us through the Macs products? You might be closer to these than me.
Yeah, no, I can't say I am, but we've got the use of Macs when it comes to the size of things, again with the iPhone there, and then with I suppose the size of the AirPods as well. The bigger version. Still a current product there, and then of course with the M series chips, we've got the the use of Macs in there as well.
And I've got to call out the iPhone Pro Max. So we've got an I, we've got a Pro, we've got a Max. We're getting 3 in 1. We might get a winner if we're doing bingo. All right, we'll move on to the next one. So Mini. So we love things being small as well. So we had the compact before C, and then I sort of preluded a little bit that the C versions of things were probably the prelude to the Mini versions of things we've got now. So before we got the Mac Mini, there was the Mini dock for the PowerBook Duo, which I pulled out just recently to put, because it's got a really special interface connector for the Duo. So there's a photo of that connector on the webpage from last week. Then we've got the Mac Mini, the iPod Mini, the iPad Mini, HomePod Mini. I've got lots of those around the house. And the iPhone Mini I actually had forgotten about. And I think a lot of other people have probably forgotten about as well.
Oh gosh, that's my favorite iPhone form factor. I would still be an iPhone. If they did a 16 mini, I would have bought that instead of a 16 Pro. I think the mini is fantastic, and my kids have them, and every time I get to hold them, I'm reminded of how light and small they are. So battery life, not great, but yeah.
I've just dusted off my own iPhone collection as we were chatting about off air, and I've got to say I used an iPhone 4 for a long time through work, and I just love the form factor, the glass back and front. I mean, I know they broke a lot, and cases were still in their genesis back then. But it's just a beautiful phone to have in your hand because it is that small form factor, but most of the functionality as well.
Yeah. Yep.
So going back to Mac's things, we can have 2 of things. Do you want to run us through the Duos?
Duo, wow, yes. So the Duo file, I know you've got a bit of a connection with that one there, JD. But the use of Duo. In fact, JD, tell us quickly again about the Duo file. I think we covered it in a previous episode briefly.
We might have, yeah. So the Pro file we've covered already was the hard drive for the Apple III and the Lisa. And they had been putting together Twiggy drives. So the Lisa 1, that we call the Lisa 1, had the 5 1/4 inch Twiggy floppy drives, and they were trying to build those as separate sales products for the Apple II and probably the Apple III. And if you got 2 of these things in the one box, now my goodness, that would be expensive. The idea was it was going to be the Duo file. There was a Unifile as well. But never got released because the Twiggies were such a disaster that it got shelved. But they did develop them, and previously we've spoken about the interface card that I've just uncovered in my collection recently. So that's the Duo file. Sadly, never got released.
Duo. The Duo disc thankfully did, and 2 5 1/4 inch drives in one, which is nice and convenient. And then we saw Duo adopted on the PowerBook range, which, gosh, yeah, again, I guess we're talking about the use of the word Duo here, the fact that you had the best of both worlds. You could have a desktop setup and a portable setup. But the Duo itself was, I know for a period of time, I don't have the exact detail off the top of my head, but it remained Apple's the smallest machine, most compact laptop for quite a while, alongside the PowerBook 100 as well, which also sort of liken that, shared that sort of feat. But the Duo, here was I was going to say, could also maybe have almost been called the Mini, the PowerBook Mini or the PowerBook Compact. But we've got the use of the word Duo there, and then the Duo charger, the MagSafe. Duo came back when we were talking about the MagSafe Duo charger, so to charge multiple devices at once.
And the docks, and the picture I've got there, I fortunately had it on file. The Macintosh PowerBook Duo 2300C. What a mouthful! And a few buzzwords in there as well.
Yes, we got the C in there as well. Yes.
Fantastic. All right, so if there's a Duo, I think we're probably already spoilers. There's a Uni. So if you've got two, you can have one. So the Unifile, again, this was the Twiggy drive that never got released. But there are some examples around, and there's one in New South Wales, and there's quite a couple in the US, but they're pretty rare, but never released. The Uni Disc had a couple of different versions. The Apple 5.25 floppy drive for the Apple II, when they changed the enclosure from the Disc 2 metal enclosure to the plastic enclosure, it became the Uni Disc. And no nomenclature, but I've just put the 5.25 in there for specification. And then later on, when the Apple II line got hold of 3.5-inch discs, it was in a Uni Disc. And I've these that didn't actually have front labels, so that's a photo of the bottom sticker on one of those Uni Discs. Reasonably desirable because they've actually got a 6502 processor in them, because they're an intelligent device to attach to basically dumb Apple IIs that didn't know about 3.5-inch disc drives. Wow. So yeah, Uni got used a couple of times. I reckon there's probably some other examples, but I couldn't find any when I was doing the research.
Yeah.
Do you want to take us through Air?
Yeah, look, I think this one is still quite modern in terms of its use, but we know that there might be a new iPhone Air product, or I should say an Air product coming out very soon, attached to the iPhone. But we've seen it used for wireless capabilities of some description, and then we've seen it used to talk about something which is very thin, so in the likes of the MacBook Air, iPad Air. But I think Airport, that's one where we can first saw the Apple's adoption for Wi-Fi, what we know as Wi-Fi. They used Air with Airport, which was pretty cool.
And for quite a while, and there was even discussion that they might have brought it back more recently with their own chips, but that seems to have gone quiet again now. Next up, we've got Classic, and Classic is a fairly classic word for Apple to use, and in fact, it was the word that created this particular episode of the podcast. Yes. Because for me, it's very easy to slip between model names, particularly when they've got common words like Classic in it. So we had the Mac Classic originally, and then the Classic 2, the Color Classic, and the Color Classic 2, and I've taken a picture of that one today in the family room. Then the iPod original series became known as Classic. Now, it was just iPod up until, I think, the number 6, generation 6, and they called it the Classic iPod. But now we refer to all of that series as the Classic iPod. And then, I think, spoilers earlier, in OS X, the Classic environment became a thing, which was to run the previous Mac OS 9 inside OS X, which is a great thing to do because you can run, again, virtualization, a bit like AUX back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Right, Power. Over to you, sir.
Power, yeah. So we saw the Power CD. That was use of the word power. And then, of course, I think would be most familiar with Power Books, which we saw.
We've talked enough about them.
First, we've talked about them, yeah. And then, the use of Power Macintosh to represent when they switched to Power PC chips. So, again, a bit of a sort of a mixed use here because the first Power Books weren't using Power PC chips, but all Power Macintoshes were using Power PC chips, and that's when they adopted, putting Power in front of Macintosh for the Power Macintosh. So,
fantastic. Now, probably a common term, but because Apple used it for a couple of different things, it was probably worth putting portable in. We've got Mini, we've got Macs, we might as well have other forms of descriptors. So the Mac Portable, and then there was the backlight version, still called the Mac Portable, and the Portable Style right at a match. And I had to put this icon in for Matt because I know he loves the design aesthetic.
I think that's great. I think it's a great image. And I'm going to say something controversial here, JD. I'm wondering if after the Mac Portable, when we know what then became the PowerBook, and their chalk and cheese machines and form factors, has the word portable been tainted by what first was associated with the Mac Portable?
Yeah, quite possibly. Except the portable style writer's in PowerBook colours. It's in the slate grey colour.
It is, yes.
So there's still, unless they were developing it earlier. I mean, the style writer's been around for ages, and this was just a different way of configuring the same basic printer, the same basic Canon printer. So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the portable became the luggable. That's how people refer to it, and so yeah, perhaps, and they really haven't used it since, have they, for anything?
No. So maybe if, on retrospect, if they wanted some more credibility with the Style Writer, they could have called it the Style Writer Air or the Style Writer C, Style Writer
the
Mini.
Power Style Writer.
Anyway, very good.
So personal's another fairly common descriptor, but again, used in a couple of different ways for Apple. Again, but not a lot, which is surprising given, the personal computer. Maybe they wanted to get rid of, no reference to PC, perhaps. I don't know. But the Apple personal modem, there was a couple of different models. Of course, we don't need modems anymore, so they're collectible, very collectible, actually. And so I happen to have imported an original Apple personal modem just recently, and that's the label from the bottom of that. And then there were some personal laser writers as well. So there was the laser writer, and then they had some, slightly smaller home use laser writers, which I think were the portable laser writers. But given everything is personal use in Apple's land, how surprising they don't use it more often.
Yes, I was going to say, JD, I'll pick you up there as well. You used the word laser writer and portable in the same sentence, and so
did I say portable? Oh dear,
yeah. You did, yes. Very funny.
All right. Next up, servers. Over to you.
Servers, yeah. Look, the versions of machines, which was usually the case, which were equipped to accommodate for more storage or more RAM or just some sort of features, which meant using them in a environment that was going to serve multiple users, was usually the case there. I know the Apple Network server was far from just slapping server on an existing personal desk product. It was its own product in itself, but and then of course we saw the dedicated servers come back with the X servers as well. So used for a few purposes there.
Yeah, Apple had an on and off relationship with servers, haven't they? Not to do with naming really, but just they didn't want them, and then they had the workgroup servers, and then they didn't want them, and then they had the Apple Network server, and then they didn't want them, and then there's sort of love-hate relationship. But these days the M series chips would make wonderful servers, you would imagine. And people use them obviously that way. It's surprising they haven't come out with another server brand for that. Pod, another famous Apple term. I think kicked off with the iPod when Steve Jobs brought out that technology and released it to the world. And obviously there's all sorts of other listening devices attached to those. Including the home listening devices, the HomePod and the HomePod Mini. So lots of pods.
Lots of pods, yep.
We like to go fast, apparently, Matt. Do you want to tell us about Quick?
Quick, yeah. Look, in the early days, you'd have to say that the word quick was related to visual of some type, or multimedia, I guess we could say as well. It was kind of Apple's, go-to word for multimedia when we look at some of the technologies that they had, Quick Draw, QuickTime in particular, and various iterations of that. And then, Quick Take as a piece of hardware that we had to take photos. So it seemed to be sort of connected with multimedia in the early days. And then later on, different technologies to be able to do things quickly. So it was... quick look, I think, is a good one there as an example. But early use, I think, around the multimedia term is what I could sort of gather, JD.
Yeah, and ease of use towards the end. Yeah. Talk is another one, perhaps not used so much now, but it was very big in the early Apple networking days. So we had all sorts of talking, a couple of which I had to check to make sure they were real. I'm pretty sure they were. So Apple Talk is probably the most popular one, and I think it's been used for all sorts of different other things outside of Apple since then, in terms of podcasts and other things. But Apple Talk was the protocol on the 8-pin serial ports. Local Talk was the hardware. I managed to find a box out in the garage this morning, so we had a picture. But Token Ring, they had Token Talk. Apparently, it was a real product. Pretty rare. I've never seen a product for it. Ether Talk was actually the description of using the Apple Talk protocol over Ethernet, so that's Ether Talk. FDDI, I can't for the life of me remember what it stands for, but it's another networking protocol that was implemented in the back end. Probably no one ever knew it was there, but the techies. It was certainly in a very technical document that I found it. Then we had Plain Talk, which was the text-to-speech technology that we talked about before with Macdownunder and so forth. Plain Talk was the software in the background running all of that, and they came out with a microphone, which was it was a powered microphone. So in terms of connectors, it provided power down the little 3.5mm connector, so it made it different. And we've talked about Macdownunder before, which is the front end software for text to speech.
Yeah, so we moved from using Talk for networking related stuff to using Talk for speech related technologies there.
But we don't use it at all now.
No, that's it. Pad we do. So that's one that stuck with us. And I think, we had the Message Pad, which came out, of course, the Newton platform, Newton family, I should say, as well. So we had the Message Pad come out. We've seen the various, trackpads come out, the Magic Trackpad, well, in fact, the iPad before the trackpads came out, but the iPad, of course, as we know, which I just want to shout out and say that if we look at things like the Macintosh turning into the iMac, I think it was really cool that, we could say there's a connection with the iPad back to the original Message Pad. Was it intentional? Maybe not, but there's a connection there, and I love it.
Absolutely, I would totally agree. Being a lover of the Newton, well, like trackpad, we're up to Magic, which is a descriptor for all sorts of things. So Apple's becoming magical with Magic keyboards and Magic mice, probably not mouses. And I don't know what the plural trackpads is. I presume it's trackpads. So all sorts of input devices that are Magic. Which I think is probably more a reference to the fact that they're wireless, and because like keyboards don't have, now you've got Touch ID, which makes them a bit magic. I've got to say, I love the Touch ID product in my keyboard, my desktop keyboard. But there's not much else magic about a keyboard other than it's wireless. But of course, I use a Magic Trackpad, love it with the multi-finger gestures. I use it whilst I'm running the podcast here to be able to control everything behind the scenes. And I did like the Magic Mouse, but I found the trackpad just meant that I could save a bit of desktop real estate. So, love the products.
Okay, so on to Studio, which personally, JD, I associate mostly with Apple's displays. We've seen that used currently with the Mac Studio display that they've got, but of course earlier on in the early 2000s, sort of turn of the century, we had it adopted on Apple's display range, which was initially the CRT monitors, and then they continued the use of the term Studio when they were talking about the smaller LCDs and reserved the word cinema, which I don't think we cover in a separate topic here, but reserve the word cinema for the larger professional displays. So we've seen the word Studio used amongst the displays a bit there, and again, one that they've brought back, which I liked. And then we've seen it on the software suites for the professional software that they've got as well: Logic, Final Cut, and DVD Studio Pro. So those packages often had more tools or more bits of software in there other than just the core bit of software as well.
Okay, so if you don't want to be plus and you don't want to be max. You might want to be extreme. And Apple want to be extreme occasionally. And so Airport Extreme, the Wi-Fi, when they upgraded to 802.11n down in the graphic there, the Airport became Airport Extreme. And Quartz Extreme is a reference to the underpinning display technology in the Apple operating system, which I think has moved on since then, but it was a term that was used behind the scenes to promote how good the graphics were in the Mac OS itself.
That's it. Probably a quick one here for us because it's not too retro, JD, but ultra we've now got, like you said, another term to mean great in some way, greater than normal. So we've got that in the Apple Watch series, Apple Watch Ultra, and the M series Ultra range as well.
Neither of which I had, so again, I had to steal a photo from somewhere else to do it. Right, well, that does us for for parts of words to describe products. It turns out Apple used some whole product names a couple of times in their history too. Starting off with Apple Vision. Now, it's convenient that it's turned to me for this slide, as it turned out. That was completely random. But I've got a bit of a story to tell with this one. So Apple Vision was clearly there because we know about the Apple Vision Pro, which is the still selling, I think, virtual reality headset. And there's about to be a version 2.
Tongue-in-cheek reference there, JD.
And about to be a version 2, and I'd really love one. So if someone out there is wanting to sell one cheap, let me know, because I really want an Apple Vision Pro. But anyway, I digress. There are Apple Vision monitors. I'm going backwards here. 17-inch and 20-inch. I actually thought the Audio Vision was an Apple Vision monitor, but it wasn't, the 14-inch. But there were Apple Vision monitors around. But dragging back into my love of Apple II history, I actually thought it came out with the DOS system disk. It didn't. It came out on tape. So there was the Apple Vision program for the original Apple II in binary code by Bob Bishop, but actually released by Apple. So it is an Apple product, released on cassette for the Apple II. I was actually going to put the YouTube video. I'll put a link to it in the description. I was going to play the video, but for those people that have actually watched Apple Vision recently, which I have, it is really slow to get started. So I thought it might be best if people go offline to watch the video of that in the essence of time, because we've taken a bit of time today. Moving on, do you want to speak to MagSafe?
MagSafe, yeah. So we're introduced to MagSafe with the easily detachable power adapter connection on the MacBook Pro is where that first landed, I believe. It wasn't a PowerBook tech. It wasn't on the PowerBooks. So I'm going to say the very first MacBook Pro. And then we saw that change and morph as it needed to become a little smaller, and we had MagSafe 2. So then we saw MagSafe also feature in the charging technology for the likes of the Apple Watch, the AirPods, and the iPhone. So to be able to connect up and charge wirelessly. Same concept, do it magnetically. So the purpose didn't change in terms of the use of the magnetic and the word mag in there, but something which they've recycled, with a bit of a twist.
For a completely different technology. Let's face it. The only commonality is magnets and charging.
Magnets, yes.
And so common, in fact, that when I went to find a picture, none of the products have MagSafe written on them. So I actually had to steal one off the internet because I don't have the large MagSafe boxes. So inbuilt. Even the Apple website didn't have it, so I had to go to the wiki page to get the logo.
There we go.
Now the SuperDrive. There's actually an external company that also marketed a SuperDrive at about the same time that the Apple were using the term to mean also a portable media device. But in Apple's terms, the original SuperDrive was a 3.5-inch floppy drive with 1.4 meg capacity, and again, I'm reusing the logo there, another little bit of flex, but the Mac SE SuperDrive had that particular drive in it. That was its key feature. But then sometime later, we moved through CDs and we moved through all sorts of other media. Even DVD read-only drives came out. But eventually Apple released DVD drives that were capable of reading and writing. And they talked about them being super drives again, even though they're never going to have a magnetic medium in them. In fact, they'd die if you threw in a magnetic media. And then more recently, there's the individual product, which is the external connection, USB connection to a DVD drive as well, which I guess is the same idea of the inbuilt one, but it is a different technology and it's an external component product that's sold separately. So the SuperDrive, still with us. Well, actually, probably not so much now. We've sort of got rid of having drives attached to things these days. We're all internet based.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to say as well, JD, for your collection, for my collection, for our viewers' collections, the Quicksilver, the original Quicksilver G4 also featured the word SuperDrive across the drive flap. And that was dropped later on. So if my memory serves me correctly, the SuperDrive came in with the 733 top of the line gigabit Ethernet, digital audio Power Mac G4, but the Quicksilver G4, when they changed the enclosure, actually had SuperDrive written on the front. So you can put that next to the Macintosh SE.
Every time we have a conversation, Matt, there's another thing I need to look for.
Yeah.
Righto. So we're not going to talk about other things like book or file or all those sort of common terms or general computer terms. We did talk about server, admittedly, but we're not going to cover all those other things because we could be here all day. Yep. So let's have a look back and see who was the winner, which product was the winner in the naming scheme bingo. Insert your drum roll here. What do you reckon it would be?
Well, I was going to say the PowerBook Duo, the Duo 2300C, I thought would be close to it, but I'm on the edge of my seat, JD.
It's going there. What is it? All right. It was the iPhone XS Max with 4 special schemas in it. It must have been one hell of a phone. In fact, I've read some reviews just yesterday in preparation, and the reviews in the day were superlative. So it actually was the best phone. The only downside was it was large and battery life, but there's nothing new there. So, I mean, if you're going to buy a large phone, don't complain that it's too big to put in your pocket, I reckon. But that was what the reviewers were saying. But otherwise, it was apparently a one hell of a phone. So when they come down in price, I will get one for the collection. But they're still quite expensive.
That's great.
All right. Honourable mentions. So there are 3 products that I've found that had their entire name full of bingo bits. So the iPod Classic had 3 bingo bits. AirPod Pro and AirPod Max all had 3 bits of bingo. And then there were those that just had 3. There's quite a list of things that just had 3 bits. So the Duo's in there. The PowerBook Duo 2300C is there. But there's quite a few others that have got 3 bits of the scheme that we've talked about today embedded. So there you go. Congratulations to all of those. Now, we may well have missed a few, so let us know in the comments. Now, it'd be interesting to see what happens from here on in, because Apple are now going to name their products after the year of launch, particularly the Mac OS and iOS and so forth. So, we're looking forward to getting Mac OS 26. It's still going to have a code name, apparently, just like we've got Sequoia at the moment. But the others won't. They'll just be the year. So it's a bit like buying a car. It's the Corolla 2026 model. Apple's going to be very much the same. I wonder whether we'll see the same with hardware. So maybe the iPhone 17 will actually be the iPhone 26. We'll have to wait and see.
Okay.
They haven't launched a couple of weeks, I think, before the launch. So
that's as of recording right now. Yeah, JD, I'm going to say this. This isn't going to last. I don't think this naming scheme is going to last. So you heard it here first. When they start dropping the year and they adopt something else, I just don't think it's got the legs, because it's not very pretty. So it's not very Apple, I don't think.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I've been thinking about this in preparation for today. So automotive manufacturers get away with it. They keep the Kingswood name for a decade or more. They kept the Commodore name for a decade or more. But I think maybe in technology, where particularly tech users that are going to be the people that go out and buy the latest, greatest thing, like shiny new. And I agree. I think people are going to want to see a different thing with a different name to indicate that it's different. I think you're right, which is disappointing, because it makes it very difficult for us collectors to work out all the models, because there's no sequence to make the consistently inconsistent piece that we spoke of before.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's quite a list we've been through, and I'm sure we've missed a few. So they've had a lot of products in Apple over their 49 years so far. What's your favourite Apple product name? Does it include any of the special repeated things that we've talked about today? Have we missed any that you know about? Let us know down in the comments. And as we keep on saying, if you've got any ideas for improvement or future topics for the show, let us know down in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, so on to recent news, and this is a bit indulgent, but K-Man Chronicles, who was at the VCF Down Under up in Canberra earlier in July, has got a video describing the whole day. Not just me, although for obvious reasons I've stopped at that part of the video. But thanks for the call out, K-Man. Really enjoyed it. But I'll put a link to the video down in the description. But take a look. It talks about the rest of the VCF Down Under as well. Well worth a watch.
Very cool.
Now, I know I keep doing this, but I am really interested. There's another Apple One for sale at R&R Auctions. Now, I think it's a different one to the last auction. So this one's open until September 21. Now, they've also posted the pricing for their last auction that we've talked about. Now, the Apple One, Lisa One, and the ventless Apple II that I was very interested in were all passed in and don't appear to have actually been sold. So they got bids, but they didn't reach the reserve, from what I can tell. So that's interesting. But if you want to check out prices, go and have a look at their site. It's still listed on their homepage. But the one thing I just thought we'd have a chat about, and we talked about it off air as well, there was an iPhone first generation, which would have been a 2G, 4 gigabyte, so the lowest specification, so probably the very first model released. Unopened in box, so still in the shrink wrap. And it sold for $81,989 US. So it's over 100,000 Australian dollars. I haven't done the calculation, depends on the day. Very expensive, and that includes the buyer's premium, so that's good. But I've got to say, that's a lot of money to spend on an iPhone. I get the idea of the first model and still in box. But these things have got batteries that are known to swell and break open cases and damage things. So, gee, I don't know. I'd want to have this thing X-rayed before I paid that much money on a phone or an iPad or something with a built-in battery. What do you reckon?
Yes. Yeah, I think there is a risk there, and it's all about having something which is unopened, of course, and the 4 gig iPhone first gen is that's the hardest one to get, because there were plenty more of the other ones, of course. So hence why it's got a bit of a premium if you were comparing it to an 8 gig brand new inbox, which I think there are also some of those listed as well. On
there
the
were.
auction.
They went for 10,000 or thereabouts.
At the same time, yeah. So, but yeah, you're right, JD. Are you going to pick up your iPhone 4 gig boxed and see a puddle of corrosion at the bottom of it one day? Oh gosh, that would be heartbreaking. So, but you never want to crack that seal. So yeah, it's a dilemma.
It is, and I don't get the idea of having something. Well, actually, I've kept a few things in box so I can do the unboxing. But my plan is to unbox them at some point because I want to use them and well see them at least, and ideally use them if I can get them to work in the current technology days. So anyway, interesting. Again, down in the comments, let us know your thoughts. Would you? Well, you may not spend that much money on an iPhone, but if you were spending lots of money on something new in box, unopened. Would you think twice about it if it had a battery or some other feature that might make it damaged just because of the passage of time? Let us know. Moving on to coming events. So WasFest 41 is coming up. According to the website, the 27th of September. This event's held in New South Wales. Again, it's in a private house, so check the website and make contact with the organisers for the details. Also coming up in September, on Friday the 12th, is the Adelaide Retro Computer Group meeting in Unley from 5:30 till 10:30. So check the website and check it out. The technology markets were spoken about a few times in the past and didn't really have a good understanding of whether they were going to have a vintage computer collection. Now, I don't know whether they've been watching us, Matt, but they've actually specified that their Sunday the 7th event is in Reservoir, but their next event after that, on the 14th of September, is going to be at Keysborough and will include a vintage computer collection show. So there you go. We need to be ready for the 14th of September. But check out their website for details. The Retro Gaming Bendigo meeting is coming up on the 6th of September. At St Killian's Hall in Bendigo. Again, they say there, bring along your console, handheld or computer or collection to show off. So again, if you're an Apple gamer, maybe this is your opportunity to go along and tell everybody how good Apple gaming is. So please get along if you can't make it to the Mac Museum, because the Mac Museum Open Day is the same day at the similar time from 10:30 till 4.
That's it. Yes, I'm going to take just a general pitch this week, JD, and say that if you've ever thought about getting into vintage computing, get along to one of the events that we've mentioned, whether it's Mac Museum or the Bendigo or the Adelaide one, because the people of the hobby are generally very, very welcoming and want to talk to you about their stuff. So if you can't get down to Mac Museum, because we'd love to see you, JD. I think you've said you're booked in to be down at Mac Museum. We'd love to see you and chat vintage tech. We've got a few things on, but yeah, just don't not go to any of these events. You gotta get out there and indulge yourself. It's great.
Absolutely, and my experience in the Canberra event was just fantastic. Let alone I'm in at the Mac Museum all the time now, but when it's open. But yes, it's a great group. But again, the Mac Museum, I've got to say, I'm a local. It is a great event, and it is coming up on the 6th of September, and I'll be there with my mice, I think.
Wonderful. Very good.
Okay, so just before we start this week's for sale section, this week I did another sweep for retro Apple stuff, less than $100, but this time I added in, mostly, there's one exception, it had to have part of our naming scheme in there. So let's see what we've got. Okay, so first up we have a power book. So the power being the key word here. G4, working. Great photo there in Adelaide for $100. Fantastic to get a working power book of this vintage. Don't see them come up terribly often. So there you go. Get a power book from Adelaide from Facebook.
Beautiful. The 12-inch ones are so cute, so beautiful. So yeah, they're a great one to buy. $100. Someone buy it. That's great.
Next up, we have an Apple Mac. Now, clearly from the photo, it's an iMac. And in fact, it's an iMac G5 when you look more closely. So quite desirable. It says that it's working and comes with the mouse and keyboard that matches. I don't think that's the matching cable, Matt, so probably not for you. But $100 in Melbourne. Next up, we have the vintage 1993 Apple portable siren. We even spoke about this one in the episode earlier.
We did.
$100 from New South Wales. And I've got to say, shout out to this seller. I actually bought something off him recently. Did a great job in packing, great communication. So I don't normally shout out to some of the sellers, but I've dealt with this seller before, and he is reputable.
Great.
Next up, we have the Apple Stylewriter 2 vintage printer. So it's the 2 piece that made this one of interest. $30 from Brisbane. Next up, bit of a reference back to the Apple mice episode from a couple of weeks ago. But this is 2 Apple mice. Now, they're actually, I've checked, they're Pro mice. So the Pro being the operative word. $40 for the 2 of them from Adelaide. Not bad. Next up, we've got the Apple Airport Extreme. So we've got Air and Extreme in this one. So the count's going up. $20 from Melbourne. I had to put an outsider in just because of the novelty factor. And so this ring in is a key ring with the Apple logo. It's not a genuine Apple product, I don't think. But at $9.53, bit of a bargain if you like Apple memorabilia. I'll probably grab one and put on my key ring. In honour of the podcast. So there you go. Would you get one of these?
Yeah, very cool. Buy it before Apple puts the skids on their
they've got
non-authentic, non-licensed material.
Yeah. Well, they've got 3 available here, and in fact, there's other sellers with the same thing. So there's lots of them around, and they're all under $10. So worth having a look.
Cool.
Wow, what a big episode. Thanks for everyone for joining us this week for our walk through Apple nomenclature. Hope you've enjoyed our deep dive into the Apple naming conventions. We'd appreciate any comments to help us improve, and anything particular you'd like us to discuss next week. So, Matt, any final thoughts about Apple naming conventions?
I've learned a lot, JD, as always, which has been great. And I have to say my favourite ones are just the ones that we've seen in the past and then have come back in some form more recently. So, shout out to Apple Vision, Studio Display. I think those 2 in particular are great that we've got them in current product. But yeah, wow, there's a lot there.
Yeah, and again, if we've forgotten any, please let us know down in the comments. We're happy to take it on board. And I might point out that I've put all of this up on the Macdownunder website as well. So if you want to go through the big list and use it for your research, and let us know down in the comments if there's anything missing, because I'm happy to add it in at any time. So we'll be back again next week with a new subject. So please like and subscribe so you don't miss out. Thanks again for joining us this week. Thanks, Matt, again for working through this week's subject, Apple naming conventions. Boy, what a topic. So thanks again. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining the Macdownunder Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.